Hey, deserving listeners, this is part 2 in which I react to Aaliyah's interview with Cameron from season 1 of Love is Blind. He and I believe his partner Lauren have a YouTube channel called Hanging with the Hamiltons. So check it out. They have a lot of subscribers. So I did not know. I have to check out their content as well. But let's get to the interview.
Maybe if both people are emotionally detached, you weren't engaged, you weren't, leading towards those things. I can understand this.
Sure.
It's a big city, but it's also very small.
Yeah.
So this could happen.
The same way. Yeah.
Right. This could happen. I was trying to be open. But I will say once I started getting both sides of the story and putting pieces together, I was like, something is not adding up here.
No.
Something is not adding up. And that's truly how I felt. I was like, I don't know if, this is a coincidence that you were both here.
Right. So here she is describing what I imagined was going on. And she alluded to this a little bit at the dinner with Uche, but I was imagining it was a lot worse than she was even getting at. So I think she's talking about that right now.
I don't know if, maybe you told her, hey, I'm not interested anymore. Maybe she wasn't ready to let you go. I don't know. And I think that me having these thoughts, totally fair.
Yeah, it's totally fair. If someone lies to you, then you think, well, what can I believe of anything that they've told me? That is the destructive power of lying. And I am very often ranting about that, that if you're at a crossroads and lying seems like a good path to take, even if you think of it as a white lie, be very, very careful, because you can ruin someone's trust in you by going down that road, even if it was for an insignificant thing. If you have ever been a victim of this, like your partner, is at work and then they go to the store and then they go back to work and then they come home and you say something like, oh, did you go to the store today? Because you see something that they bought. You're like, oh, did you go to the store today? And your partner is worried that you're going to get upset. And so they're like, no, I didn't go to the store. And you're thinking, well, where did you get that? You were just asking because you were making conversation. You weren't interrogating them. And even if you were, I suppose, I don't know if that justifies just straight up lying to someone. You can absolutely just tell someone, stop interrogating me. That's what she could have said to Uche. She could be like, wait. I don't like your tone. So, there's a lot of options other than just retreating or giving up or shutting down or lying. Or she didn't lie. But anyway, so, you can imagine how destructive that would be, even if it's insignificant. And even if he comes forward and says, a couple of weeks later, it's like, a couple of weeks ago, I did lie to you about going to the store, but I was worried that you were going to be yelling at me about it. And I just said I was going to the store. Even with that, it's pretty minor, right, in the grand scheme of things. But, of course, now you're going to wonder, well, what else are they lying about? Because the foundation, they'll say the foundation of a relationship is trust. And what do we mean by that? Well, it depends on what context. But in this context, everything depends on your trust that the other person is being truthful. When Stacy tells me that she loves me, if I don't have trust that she's being truthful, then everything is ruined. I have to question it. Does she really love me? Yeah. And I guess more broadly, if you were betrayed and lied to significantly when you're growing up and you distrust people in general, even when someone has never lied to you because of your traumas, you might be it's rough. I've had clients like this where I am doing everything I can to create a corrective emotional experience for them such that they internalize our relationship as what it is, which is that I care about them, I'm paying attention to them, I like them, I care about, I already said that. I am there for them, I'm not secretly wanting to get away from them, I'm not going to hurt them, I'm not exploiting them, I'm not using them, I'm there for them. And through that internalization of that relationship, they believe that they're worth someone paying attention to them, and thus they have greater self-esteem and more trust for other people and more emotional regulation. The science demonstrates this. And so it can be very difficult when a client just generally distrusts everybody because they were treated in a certain way growing up. so much so that they don't even trust me when there's no reason not to trust me, right? And so it is this catch-22 for people that, in order for them to trust people, they have to be in relationships in which it is trustworthy, in which someone is trustworthy for them, right? But in order for them to see a relationship as trustworthy, they have to trust that person enough to open themselves up to it, right? So it's really a difficult situation.
Because it's just weird to me that, you, even if production says, hey, don't say this, the way I am wired as a person, I'm going to keep it real. If I really care about you, I'm going to keep it real with you.
That's a good point. Yeah. I don't remember thinking that. I might have, but that, okay, fine. Production told you to not say anything, but still, really? I think at some point, you wouldn't have known when you agreed to not say anything what was going to happen with me. At some point, did it not cross your mind that, like, did you do anything? You could imagine in that moment that Aaliyah might have been helped if Uche and or Lydia said, oh, no, I went to production and I begged them and they said no. And I was falling, for Uche, for example, he could have been in a situation where it's like, no, I wanted to. I was begging them, but they actually told me if I said something, they were going to kick me out of the pods. And then I was worried you're going to meet someone else. And I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to be with you. So it was a very difficult situation for me. But I don't think that happened, right? And that's what she's saying, yeah. The more I think about the situation that Lydia and Uche were in, and that according to the showrunner, he said that they discovered that they knew each other and said, look, we have to remove you from the show. We're really sorry. And then the cast, Lydia and Uche, begged to stay on the show. And they're like, well, production was like, well, I suppose you can say, but you can't tell anyone that you know each other. And that seems like at the time you could imagine that would be a good choice or a viable solution. But we see what happened, and you wouldn't want to take that risk, right? Because you can't. It's not gonna. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. If you allow them to stay on the show, and they can say what they want, then it ruins it for everyone else, because now they know what the other person looks like, and it sort of puts a fly in the ointment for other people, because they're like, well, Uche says that Lydia is a bad person, but it could bias people. It just really and the audience would be like, well, wait, this isn't really Love is Blind. This is like Love is Blind with this huge asterisk. How many of these people actually know each other and are spreading information around the lounges? So, you could say, well, you can't say anything, but then it runs in this stage. So to me, looking back, they should have just had them not on the show. They should have just this risk. Or the show should do more vetting. But we don't know the vetting process. Maybe we'll learn. There's a lot of criticism about production not doing enough vetting, and we don't know. I haven't heard, and maybe you have, but I haven't heard enough information to know, because it's possible that they did do reasonably enough to vet to make sure that people haven't dated before. And Uche and Lydia just lied, or they obscured or something. Because if production put minimal effort into vetting, like Lydia, who have you dated in the past year? If they had just done that, then it's like if they claim they vet, then and they don't ask that question, then what the heck, right? So you got to figure they must have asked that question, right? And if they did, then of course Lydia or Uche, both must have not mentioned it. You could imagine Uche, the way he saw it, he'd be like, no, I dated her years and years ago, so I don't have to mention her. But even if, it would be so hard to have this work, and of course they pick big cities, but it would be so hard because you pick 30 people, and the way probability works, the chance of at least two people knowing each other, anyway. So anyway, Aaliyah is talking about how scary it was, which makes total sense.
Hey, this is what it is. And what a lot of people don't see is 3 days prior to him telling me about him and Lydia's past, I I told him Lydia was my closest friend.
Yeah.
I had a full conversation.
Okay. I think we might have known that sort of, but maybe not. Or at least I was wondering. And yeah, that does clear it up that, okay, from Uche's side, he had as much responsibility. I mean, I still think Lydia it's a bigger transgression that Lydia didn't at least do something. She could have backed away from Aaliyah at any point. She could have just been like, oh, she's getting into Uche, Aaliyah's getting into Uche, I should probably start backing away. Or Lydia could have even gone to Aaliyah and said, I'm so sorry, but we can't be friends. I really want to be friends, and it's a long story, but let's talk after the pods. But for now, I'm really sorry, but I have to, and it's nothing about you. It's about, I can't tell you why. I don't know, that sounds awful. At the very least, just a little less intensity, right? Like more of a listener. That would have been the thing to do if you're Lydia, is just to be like, when Aaliyah comes back crying, Lydia is just there holding her hand and just being like, oh. Instead of like, look at me. She was really telling her a lot of things and influencing Aaliyah a lot. And then eventually just, pours a bunch of information non-consensually at Aaliyah eventually. So to me, that's a bigger transgression. For Uche, I think it's less known to him. And even if he did know that Lydia and Aaliyah were best friends, were becoming very close, there's a chance that Uche didn't really understand the extent to it, right? And you can imagine for Uche, given the position that he's in, he's like, okay. And I'm trying to give a sympathetic view. It's also possible that Uche is just a complete train wreck. We might be able to imagine that. But anyway, just going with a sympathetic view, and which could happen even with train wrecks. But that for Uche, he's saying, okay, what do I do here? I'm falling in love with Aaliyah. I'm heading towards spending the rest of my life with Aaliyah. And now she tells me her really close friend in the lounge is Lydia. Well, what do I do? I could say something to Aaliyah, maybe even hint, but then I'll get kicked off the show, probably, or I'd risk that. Does that mean my chances with Aaliyah will be over? Will they give me even a chance to talk with Aaliyah about this? Will the show figure out a way to punish me? You just wouldn't know. Or would they kick us both off? Would they kick me out of the show and Lydia and Aaliyah? And would Aaliyah resent me for it? It's a tough situation. We could imagine. So it's not cut and dry like they should have said something. It's a weird situation, right? And then you think, would they worry about being sued by Kinetic? Or, who knows? Uche's a lawyer. Maybe he would have thought about that. He probably read the contract pretty closely. I'm just going to take a guess. So, yeah, again, just looking back, I think they just should have removed them from the show. I think it's pretty obvious.
Experience, and there are some pretty private things there. So I feel like I'm going to allow her to tell that if she wants to. Hopefully she will, because I think the truth will set everyone free in this situation. But yeah, I've had talks with both, and they basically, to me, it seems like there's truth to both stories.
Okay.
Right? There's truth to both stories. And then there's the truth in the middle there somewhere.
Yeah.
I think that there was some resistance in the relationship on her end.
Okay, so this is really interesting because we've heard two different stories from Uche and from Lydia. And I'm always wondering whenever I hear these kinds of things, it's not usually in my clinical life because I have a lot of time to investigate and gain the trust of people and to throw things out to people. If I have a couple in my office and they have two wildly different stories, which they often do, that's almost universal. Over time, I have trust with them and built vocabulary that I might be able to ask them questions that are a little confrontational, I suppose, but are challenging them to think about, well, maybe my narrative isn't exactly accurate. I am remembering things through emotions, or I'm biased for myself, or I was hurt at the time, so I'm looking at my partner through that lens. And so most of the time when I am wondering about things, it's usually in this context, or I guess in my regular life, where I hear two different accounts and I don't have an avenue to go down to investigate it. And what I'm often really hoping to get is a third party to tell us their impression. Now, Aaliyah is now telling us her impression of everything that she's heard from Uche and Lydia. On one side, we have to consider that Aaliyah is potentially biased, but she seems pretty level-headed. But we do know that, or she's saying anyway, that she has a lot of information. So Uche, I don't know if I show this clip, according to Aaliyah, was showing all these data that demonstrated that Lydia was this stalker, essentially, and this liar and all this stuff, which, of course, he did, right? Because his behavior is very consistent with that. We've seen him do that to other people, I believe. And also, for Aaliyah, she is a very good listener, I think. So we could just imagine that Uche would absolutely dominate, say, "Oh, you gotta see this." And I guess we're hearing that they got together outside of what we saw, whether it was after that restaurant scene or at another time. Anyway, so, and of course we know that they filmed this a long time ago. Earlier she said, it was interesting, she said that they were filming season 5 the same time as season 4, which is consistent with what that producer told me that works for Love is Blind. She was saying that, that for seasons 4 and season 5, it's a completely different crew from top to bottom. Different, I think even they call them showrunners. The Chris Colin guy, I think he's like executive producer, and there are showrunners underneath that, I think, or head producers, people that are ultimately in charge of the whole crew below Chris Colin, and then there's all these other producers below that, and there's editors, and she wasn't aware of the entire organization chart. But anyway, it is consistent with that she's saying they were filming at the same time. So they would need a completely different set of employees and equipment and all this stuff. So it's interesting to think that it's really growing in this way, because that's a pretty expensive investment, right? From my understanding, especially when they're in the pods, there are hundreds of employees that are working for the show to pull everything off. Anyway, and just along those lines, I don't know if I talked, it's just fascinating to me hear about the behind the scenes, that there are essentially 2 different wings of the individuals that work with the cast. And there's all these other people too. But the 2 main people of contact to the cast members are what she called the producers, which are, or she didn't say that word, but I think it was in that language, that essentially they're in charge of the story. They're in charge of interviewing the cast, keeping track of the story, reporting the story up the chain, trying to encourage the cast members to interact and create story, I suppose. And I suppose on other shows, and maybe on this show too, there's direct manipulation to the cast members to try to engineer a story, shenanigans, that sort of thing. And within that group, you have the camera operators, the audio people, you have assistant producers and story note takers that are like, their job is purely just to write down the story as it's occurring, so that they can report up the chain and keep track of everything. And for every cast member, they have an entire team. I think at the very least, every couple has an entire team, but I imagine in the beginning, anyway, so that comprises of like 10, 15 people. There's this other wing of people that are the logistics folks, is the word I would put to it, who are in charge of making sure that they are fed and they have water and they have their needs met, that if they have to go to the bathroom, or if they have a medical concern, or if they just need something, they're at the honeymoon and they forgot to bring a swimsuit, so someone has to run out and buy a swimsuit or something, that kind of stuff, coffee, all that kind of stuff. And so those folks are maybe like they're also in charge of transporting them from the pods to the hotel and back again, and making sure that they're taken care of in that way. And those 2 groups, they don't really coordinate necessarily that much, because there's a lot that each is keeping track of. The reason why this is so interesting to me is because up until learning about all this, I had a very simplistic view of what was happening behind the scenes. I don't know if it's just natural to do that, or it's just me, or I was influenced by the way people talk, but the way I thought about it before was that you just had production, that word, right? That you had the producers. And of course I knew that there would be lots of people, but in my head, it would always be kind of this amorphous vision of one individual, this one person that was pulling all the strings, you know. And of course, there's another wing that is the editing wing. That's a whole other section of people that have nothing to do with the other two, because once they shoot it, they put it into a hard drive somewhere and it just gets shipped to the editors, and the editors do this whole other thing. And they don't necessarily even talk to the producers, right? The stories, I'm guessing, you know, the notes and the gist of the stories get passed up, and I'm guessing at the higher levels they communicate that to the editors to give them a suggestion. But you know, the editors can do all sorts of wacky stuff. You just don't. And who's in charge of that team, right? And are they? Do they understand the ethic of the show, not to have shenanigans or to have shenanigans? You know what I mean? There's a lot of people, and from my impression about what she was saying, is given her limited role, because she wasn't even in charge of the crew. She was an assistant, right? That where she was operating from, she was doing her best to serve the cast, but she didn't know what the bigger picture was, because that wasn't her pay grade. She didn't know what the editors were looking for. She didn't know what the showrunners were exactly looking for. She didn't even necessarily know what her direct boss was motivated by. She could only go by what that person was saying. And I don't know, I just find that to be just super fascinating to me, because what it tells me is whenever you have even just more than one person involved, it exponentially increases the complexity and the chance for something to go wrong, because you just need one or two people to go off script, like an editor or a producer, to have the things that we have seen, you know, like what we saw with Jackie last season, where there was confirmed by Jackie and by Marshall that they had edited it in a way to make Jackie look bad, that she was cheating not only on Marshall, but that she was cheating on him and kissing Josh while Marshall was literally being fitted for a tuxedo for his wedding with Jackie. But according to Marshall and Jackie, that happened much later after they broke up during that scene, right? Which is a very different picture, right? And they edited it in a way that, because I think they even had both scenes playing simultaneously. Like they're at the tuck shop, and now they were with Jackie. I don't know that exactly, but it was something along those lines. And that is some serious bullshit, right? One, that's harmful to Jackie, and I guess maybe to Marshall, but also, what are you doing to us as viewers? We depend on at least a semblance of trust and reality being, on the show. And if not, then what are we watching? We're just watching a badly scripted show. That if reality TV is scripted, it's not very interesting, because it's poorly written. The reason why it's compelling is because it's at least close to reality, right? So what I wonder about, and I've thought about this before, is at what level did they know that editor did that? Because if you've ever edited like I have, not only I do all the editing for this, I do all the editing for the audio. I've also done a lot of editing just of video. Like I used to take video of weddings. I wasn't really a professional, but back before they really even had that sort of thing, people just knew that I had a video camera and I knew how to edit digitally, and so they would say, hey, can you do something? And I'd be like, oh, okay. And it takes forever when you have all that footage, and my projects are small. I can't imagine how complicated it would be. And so in my head, I always thought, well, there's always one person that knows everything, right? That's keeping track of everything. And maybe there is, absolutely. Could have absolutely been top bottom, where someone at the top, Chris Colin himself, said, we want to screw over Chris or Jackie. We want to screw over Jackie, so I want, you, editor, to do this. And maybe Chris Colin was right there. There's another possibility that one of the editors made a mistake. That's another possibility. There's got to be a very strange, complicated flowchart of timelines and everything. It's not hard to do that, of course, but you could imagine mistakes being made. I don't think a mistake was made, though, because it stands to reason that they would try to create story and drama by having shenanigans with editing. Or was it just one editor that decided, well, we have some wiggle room here, so let's put this here? Was it someone just on the editing team and they misunderstood what their boss said? I don't know. I think most people would assume that it's a top-down decision and everyone knows, but I think that's hard to say. It could be, for sure, and I don't want to discount that idea. At the very least, you would hope that when those kind of things happen, that the powers that be will have a serious all meeting of everyone say, hey, this thing happened with Jackie. We do not want that to happen again. Let's look into our systems and figure out what went wrong there. I'm not going to fire anybody, but did I miscommunicate? You just hope because mistakes are made. Now, from my memory or knowledge, I don't think they've come forward and acknowledged that they did edit it falsely or deceptively. So that points in the direction that they don't want to, because if I were Chris Cullen and I was trying to create a real show and I told the editors not to do stuff like that and they did, I wouldn't want to throw that person under the bus, but I would want to say, look, and there was a miscommunication. The editor thought that we actually were looking for that kind of sneaky editing. And that's my fault, or that was my vice president's fault because I miscommunicated them, or we didn't train the editors. You just think there would be a statement like that. But anyway, so the point is that Aaliyah is telling us that she heard all the information, or from Uche, and then she heard a lot more information from Lydia. So Aaliyah, I'm guessing, knows 100 times more information about those stories that Uche is saying, and that, because the question is, did Lydia stalk Uche? Aaliyah also alluded to things that Lydia told Aaliyah that Aaliyah doesn't want to put out there, that Lydia should be allowed to say that. I'm guessing it has something to do with either infidelity or cheating or abuse. I don't know. So for Aaliyah, she's heard all these accusations about the other person. And according to Aaliyah, which she seems like a very level-headed person, she is saying there's truth to both sides. And according to her estimation, the truth lies probably in the middle, meaning that Uche's accusations of Lydia, of the stalking and that sort, and the lying, is somewhat accurate. And that Lydia's accusation of Uche, whatever those are also seemingly somewhat accurate. And that is interesting, which leads me to believe that Aaliyah believes that she dodged a bullet. She dodged 2 bullets.
But I also think, she was maybe a bit confused as to why, because there have been this on and off thing for 2 years between them.
Yeah.
And so I that's why I say a lot of the time I'm like, woman to woman, me having stated earlier, I've been in a toxic relationship before. I think that, there were reasons on her side and on her end to do what she did. And I don't know all of the facts, because even based off of the stories that they told.
Okay, I don't know what she's saying. I'm just trying to read into it. She's trying to be respectful of each of their privacies, I suppose, or their right to put out there what they want to put out there. But I think there's a possibility that what Aaliyah was alluding to is that she believes that although Lydia might have stalked Uche in some problematic ways, there were some behaviors that you could argue is sort of stalking, but is justified given that Uche was not communicative about the status of the relationship, or that Uche was just flat out cheating or something.
Told me, Cameron, I don't even know if that's everything. I don't know if we'll ever get everything.
No, it doesn't seem like that.
I don't think we will, but I do think that there's truth to both their stories.
Okay. You hear that, right? That she's like, believe me, I can't tell you the whole thing, but given my experience and my vibe with them, I think both of their accusations are at least somewhat accurate. That's interesting to hear. And that's, as a viewer, that's very satisfying just to get at least someone's take on it, right? Because as I watch it, I'm just like, huh?
That's fair.
I really do. Me being in the more healed place, I'm still a work in progress, but I'm just like, honey, if a man says he doesn't want you anymore, okay. then that's not your man. That's not your husband. That's not your person.
Okay. So that's interesting too, right? She's not saying it directly, but it sounds like she's talking about Lydia and saying, hey, Lydia, if he is saying he doesn't want to be with you, then move on. So, yeah. I mean, the way she put it there, yeesh. Because no, Lydia, no. Given everything we've seen, and you start piecing a picture together, then yikes. And then, of course, you would think, did she follow him onto the show? Because it fits into that category. Because without all that other stuff, you'd think, well, that's ridiculous. Why would Lydia do that? But, right? Yeesh. She's also acknowledging that Uche's issues, as Lydia portrays them, is also, according to Aaliyah, valid. And that Aaliyah has seen things that say, yep, Uche is like that. So, looks like one of those situations where they both have some issues to work on.
Yeah. You know, just because it's a reality TV show it's not scripted. We're not acting. We're just people, you know. And it's things that you see on the show are real. There are real emotions, real bonds.
Yeah, it's also good to hear, you know, on other shows like with Darcy and Stacey or 90 Day Fiancé, you'll hear similar things from the cast members, but you wonder if they're just saying that because their career depends on it. Because one, they would be kicked off the show if they said otherwise, but also no one would want to watch them if everyone thought it was fake, right? So you hear that, but I don't know. I feel like on the spectrum of things that Love is Blind is more real. There's that. Also, why are people attacking Aaliyah? What is wrong with... it's upsetting.
Real friendships and real love connections being formed. So just be open to that. It's not all romantic connections. There are platonic and friendships that are created from this experience.
Right. I'm yammering too much, but briefly, you could argue that one of the reasons why one would even want to go on this show, Love is Blind, is because of the friendships that are formed. We are, you know, statistics show that the vast majority of at least Americans, and maybe in other societies, report that they don't have enough friends. And it is also a lot of research shows that the happiest people that might even live longer because of this and might have better health and better mental health are people that have sufficient friends, that have a reasonable or adequate amount of contact and closeness and intimacy with friends. Of course, it makes sense. So, and a lot of people don't have that, or they have, you know, a couple kind of friends, or they have a close friend, but they don't see that person very often. I have, since I was young, been just randomly, I suppose, very dedicated to that. I say randomly because I didn't know that it was important, you know. My parents had friends, but I noticed that they didn't hang out with friends as much as I thought they should be. And but they did have friends. And from an early age, I was just like, okay, you got to build it. You got to cultivate it. You got to put effort into it. You know, all the close friends that I have today are the result of paying attention to it and being dedicated to it, and you know, putting things aside, letting things go, things that annoy me about, because, you know, you get close to someone, they start annoying you. And so there's, because, you know, I get a lot of questions from people about, like, I don't have any friends, how do I make friends? And it's a very, very complicated topic. And the sort of advice you get on the internet, it's real trite and simplistic, like, just be yourself or ask questions. And sure, there's some tips that you can follow, but in my experience, the road, there are billions of roads to someone saying that they don't have enough friends. There's a lot of reasons, there are a lot of factors to consider. So that's what I'll say. But there's a lot of loneliness, and you could see someone saying, hey, I want to go on Love is Blind because there's, you know, maybe I'll meet my partner for the rest of my life, but also maybe I'll meet one or more really, really close friends. You know, also they go through a lot together, right? Because they're kind of in the foxhole together.
It's on the now and the future, but
okay, so that was really interesting. a lot of times these interviews aren't very fruitful, but I think this one was, to me. I don't know, was it to you? It was good for me. Was it good for you? Gross. Don't say that, Kirk. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You do.